everyone, this is Pavlina from the Pavlina Show, and we are here in New York City at Ground Zero Museum Workshop with the official photographer for Ground Zero for FDNY and an honorary battalion chief, Gary Marlon Suson. How did you start into photography, and because you weren't originally a photographer?
I got into photography when I was a very young boy. I was age 11, and I found some old cameras in my dad's closet, and I started taking them apart. They were from the 1930s, and I was so fascinated as to how these things worked. And so I started taking pictures on a little cheap Instamatic camera, and my mom started getting the film back and saying, which of the kids shot these? Because I was the youngest of 5. Who shot these beautiful sunsets? Who shot this portrait of our dog? And then I told her it was me, and she thought I had a gift for photography. And by age 13, I started entering local Chicago contests for photography. I was winning them. And then by 17, I was very honored to win the Kodak Medallion, which is the highest honor in the United States for a high school student, the National Scholastics Art and Writing Awards. They have them every year for high school students, and I won top honors for photography. And oddly enough, I had my photographs displayed along with the other winners at the World Trade Center.
Wow, that's insane, because your photos were displayed at the World Trade Center, and then 9/11 happens, and you're taking photos of the rubble of it. That's crazy. Wow. How has taking photos of Ground Zero and seeing it firsthand really affected you?
It made me grow up very fast. You got to remember, I was very young. I was in my 20s when I was shooting Ground Zero, and suddenly I was thrown into this brutal, pretty much a war zone with New York City firefighters, cops, and I'm a kid, and I've been chosen by Rudy Sanfilippo of the Uniformed Firefighters Association to document our nation's worst tragedy, and it made me grow up. It matured me. It helped me understand that it's not always about me, that it's about other people. So it just helped me grow up very fast.
So you have also been called the Matthew Brady of Ground Zero, and Matthew Brady was, obviously referring to the Civil War photographer and all of the work he has done. What here in Ground Zero, the museum, is a testimony all about that?
Well, I mean, being compared to Matthew Brady is a big honor, a big deal. I studied his work as a boy. All his battlefield scenes from Ground Zero. I think the big comparison for me, the real correlation between me and Brady is that we were each doing something that no one else was doing. He lived, ate, and breathed those Civil War battlefield scenes. A lot of people don't know it, but he was in New York City shooting debutantes and portraits of big celebrities. He gave everything up to go and shoot the death scenes and the battlefield scenes of the Civil War. And so I also gave up. I had a lucrative photography business. I gave it all up. I closed it down, and I lived at Ground Zero. So I guess that's where the similarities are, that neither me or Matthew Brady were doing it for money. We were doing it for passion. We wanted to contribute some way to history.
So you've devoted a lot of, your life and time to 9/11. Can you tell me some other stuff that you're doing?
Sure. I do a lot with voiceover for feature film and television. I have a agent here in New York City, Access Talent, and you name it, Discovery Channel, movie trailers. You won't know it's my voice, but that's my voice, narrating different things. I love doing voiceover. It's great being in that little booth, and it's a sense of pride when I get to hear my voice behind a different product or a movie.
Yeah, and that's so cool, because I actually, the headphones that we had on, I was just walking around. It was so cool. I was just like, oh my gosh, he's such a radio voice. This is so great.
It's kind of funny sometimes when I'm in the museum that people will start talking to me, and they go, was that you doing the voiceover? And I'm like, yeah. They're like, wow, you should really do voiceover. Have you ever done it? I'm like, yeah, I have a whole career in it. I'm like, that's why I narrated the stories. So I think the way you communicate these stories, it's important, especially in our audio guides. It can't be like, this is a piece of glass from Ground Zero. You have to communicate the story in a heartfelt way, because it's a very emotional subject matter. So, yep.
Yeah. Yeah, it like matches what you're feeling like when you look at the photos or when you look at the actual artifacts. It's like, okay, it all makes sense. You know what I mean? We were actually just talking about how this is a very friendly way for kids to get introduced to 9/11. So how can they find out more about it, and just tell me how it is a friendlier version than actually going to the 9/11 memorial.
The 9/11 Memorial at Ground Zero, beautifully designed museum. It's not sugar-coated. There's nothing sugar-coated down there, so it's a little harsh for children. Our museum up in the Meatpacking District, we focus on the uplifting stories, the people, the heroes of Ground Zero. We do not show video or images of the towers collapsing, the airplanes, any of those cliche images. We are a very gentle buffer for parents looking to introduce their children to the subject of 9/11 without horrifying them, because you just have to be careful as a parent. You don't want to upset your kid and scare them. And so we have children as young as age 5 listening with their headphones to all these unique 100 stories, and the nicest compliment we can ever get is from a parent who says, of all the things my kids saw in New York City, they keep talking about the museum workshop. So I'm like, really? And we think that's really great.
Yeah, and what's really, really cool about, this museum is, first of all, it's really small, so it's not like you're overwhelmed by a bunch of stuff, but it's also, in the name, a workshop. Like, you get to pick up the pieces of glass that, were on the building. You get to look at the crosses that were ironed into, or ironed so that people would, get and everything. So it's very interactive, and I think that's really great for kids.
Well, yeah, we got the name workshop. We came up with that because we're very interactive by nature. We allow people to pick up and hold artifacts when the similar artifacts at other museums are encased behind glass and plexiglass. We find that very commercial, very sterile. We want people to connect to Ground Zero, to feel what it was like to be there. And the only way to do that is to allow people to pick up and hold the very artifacts that we found at Ground Zero, like World Trade Center steel crosses and Stars of David that were burned from the steel glass. People can even kneel down and touch a piece of the first airplane that hit the tower. This museum is all about empathizing and feeling for those who died, and being able to pick up and hold tangible pieces of the Trade Center. We feel, that's what helps that mission.
Well, thank you so much for talking to me.
We appreciate you coming to our museum and having us on your show, and we wish you the best of continued success. People want to buy tickets, they can go online at groundzeromuseumworkshop.org. We're also on Facebook under Ground Zero Museum Store. A great example of family searching for family at Ground Zero is this portrait that I shot of the Geidel brothers. On the left is Ralph Geidel. On the right is his brother Mike. And pictured below on the frame there on the left is Gary Geidel, the third missing eldest brother. At the time he was missing, but he did die at the World Trade Center. The two brothers spent 9 months digging every day with their father, Paul Geidel, former Rescue 1 lieutenant. And unfortunately, they never found their brother. To make matters worse, shortly after Ground Zero ended, Ralph, on the left, got throat cancer, which is linked to him breathing in all the toxic chemicals. And he did pretty well beating the cancer for the most part, but then it resurfaced in 2014. And unfortunately, he had a heart attack, and he passed away, much to all our sadness. Although the public is not aware, hundreds, if not thousands, of 9/11 recovery workers, firefighters, police officers have died. Those who worked at Ground Zero have died of 9/11 related illness. One man that I had the honor to work with who recently passed away is Captain Bill Butler of the FDNY. Bill lost his son Thomas Butler, a firefighter at the World Trade Center. And Bill spent the entire recovery digging, and tough man, good family man, and he took his last breaths 2 years ago, and breathing in all the toxic chemicals and residues from the Trade Center for 9 months took its toll on Bill, and he passed away from lung-related illness. A very well-known image from the collection, and one of my favorites, is of a firefighter, Oscar Garcia, on a spring morning in 2002. It almost looks as though he's praying in the dirt, and this wound up being the cover of my book from my Barnes & Noble book Requiem, Images of Ground Zero. It's a unique image in that it doesn't really need much explanation, if any. You can see the frustration and almost hopelessness on his face as the sun comes up over Ground Zero, and moments later he began to dig for the missing victims of the 9/11 attacks in the dirt. At the museum we have different artifacts that are put together which represent different themes regarding 9/11. We often don't tell the visitors what they mean. We like them to interpret in their own way, but one display is of a doll and a makeup case. I put those two together because for me they represent innocence lost. When I look at the doll and the makeup case, mostly the doll just represents pre-9/11 innocence of the world, and how it's completely changed since the attacks at the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. A few months into the recovery at Ground Zero, we found out that the steel beams were being sold as scrap metal to overseas companies in Tokyo, Japan. So we decided, why not do something nice with it? So we decided to start burning crosses and Stars of Davids out of the steel beams, and we would give them to 9/11 families that lost loved ones. We would give them to churches and synagogues that lost large numbers in their congregation and so forth. It was a nice way to try and give an item of remembrance to the families. Believe it or not, this is considered a large piece of World Trade Center window glass. We could never find window glass, but over here you can see is the largest piece in the world.
This is the largest piece of glass recovered from Ground Zero. Can you just tell me a little bit more about it?
Sure. This is a very unique artifact that's on loan to our museum. Glass was the rarest thing to find at Ground Zero. Less than 1% of the nearly 40,000 windows turned to powder or melted back down into sand. Finding a piece of glass was almost impossible. So finding a piece this gigantic was really a freak of nature. It took 3 men to carry it out. It's 3 inches thick and it weighs 120 pounds. Another unique artifact on display is a piece of American Airlines Flight 11. That's the first airplane that went into the World Trade Center. We chose not to put this artifact behind glass because we don't want it to look commercial. The whole point of this museum is to help people of all ages connect deeper to what happened, to empathize with the victims that lost their lives. And so having the ability to touch artifacts like a piece of the first airplane, we feel it really goes along with our mission of education.
Obviously intense memories of Ground Zero and everything, but you also have some good memories. Can you tell me about a couple of those?
The camaraderie and the friendships that I formed at Ground Zero, they were very special, and it taught me a lot about human nature and how people can come together during times of hardship. It was a very cold winter, and I didn't know anyone when I first started working there, but they were very kind to me, very gracious, and the strength of the human spirit was never more demonstrated than during those months that I worked at Ground Zero. Today is Tuesday, September 11 calendar page. This was probably the most memorable artifact that I found. Once again, it was in the subway tunnels deep, deep below Ground Zero in the cold winter of 2001, and it was a room that was used by the managers of the PATH subway station to let the trains know which tunnels to come in on. And when I walked in, I saw the calendar page, my jaw dropped. And I used to take this calendar around the world to do speaking engagements, mostly with children, and let them hold the calendar. And finally, in 2005, when we opened up the museum, we retired the calendar to the wall. This is known as the frozen clock. It's a Timex clock that was found 100 feet below Ground Zero in the deserted subway tunnels. And it was in a little room that was used by track workers as a exercise room. And I walked by that room many times on my journeys into the tunnel. And on my last trip, I pushed the door open, and there was the clock. And what's unique about it is that it's frozen at 10:02 and 14 seconds, which is the exact second that the first tower collapsed and blew out all the electricity to that area. So at that very second, many lives were lost. So it's a very emotional artifact.